conservation is a kind of environmental issue, but conservation is not really an environmental issue. Conservation is really a social issue. So this was pointed out by then the Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. And if you see the growth, so now 2020, we will be completing how many years? 3 decades of, almost 3 decades of the convention. But where do we stand today as far as the conservation is concerned? The recent report, very recent report is the report leaked from the International Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IPBS. They have not published the report, but the report is out. There they are telling within our lifetime, which means what we have expected earlier, biodiversity loss may be a little bit slow, but biodiversity loss is very fast. By 2050, the 2050 is a kind of, the horizon, 2050 is a cutoff date. By the time 2050, Indian population will be how much? 1.5 billion. And the world population will be 9 billion. The temperature will be 1.5 degrees Celsius increase. By the time the biodiversity loss will be more than 50% of the present. So which means the situation is very complex. The next 3 or 4 decades, you have a very rampant loss of biodiversity, your temperature is increasing, your population is increasing. Then the challenges is actually the food. The challenges is, the next challenge is our health. Because man is an animal. Man is a part of the biodiversity. Only thing is, we have the developed cerebral system. Because of that, we are ruling the biodiversity. So the whole humanity, the whole human race can be wiped out within maybe another 2-3 centuries if it goes like this. So that is where, this year's biodiversity theme, they very carefully chosen the theme. Biodiversity, our biodiversity. Biodiversity is our food. Biodiversity is our health. So if you look at the food aspect, because particularly in this context, this organization, the founder of this organization is always for the kind of his popularity, his fame, his science, everything lies with the food production. So the food is for all. The food for all growth. In fact, if you look at the food for all growth, helped us to achieve the food sufficiency, food self-sufficiency for India. For that matter, world as a whole, now we have sufficient food. And also in fact, for India, we are exporting food. We export food. But if you look at the next level, the food for sustainable growth. But in fact, food production, the food production is the single most cause for the biodiversity loss, I would say. Food and agricultural production, not food production alone, food and agricultural production. The way we produce the food, the way we transport our food, the way we store our food, the way we consume our food. Actually, it is unsustainable. The emission point of view, if you look at agriculture and allied sector, in fact, 1/4 of the total emission is from the agriculture and allied sector. 25% of the total emission comes from agriculture and allied sector. The entire value chain, not from the production alone, from the production, the way we waste the food. In fact, we waste every year some 3 billion ton food, I believe, worldwide. And half of this food is sufficient for addressing your total malnutrition problem. Because your malnourished population is only less than 190 million people. So one way we waste our food. So the food production should be sustainable. So at this point of time, when we observe the biodiversity day, we have to see that the agricultural production is sustainable, environmentally sustainable, which means it should be low carbon emitting production. So how is it possible? So this is where, we all have to think. So that is a second dimension of the food production, the food for all dimension, the food for sustainable growth dimension. If you look at the freshwater water withdrawal, so much of freshwater withdrawal happens for the agricultural production. Because if you look at the freshwater now, morning we were discussing, the most critical issue in biodiversity or in the whole life, it is water. If water is there, only that life is there. And biodiversity services, biodiversity always should be read in line with the biodiversity and ecosystem services. So the ecosystem, most important ecosystem service because of biodiversity is the water, the fresh water. So if you look at the freshwater withdrawal for the agriculture is so huge. And because of agricultural unsustainable production, the water pollution is so high. If you look at the pollution, you cannot, the other day we were traveling part of the East Coast, the way we polluted our water sources, in the form, in the agriculture production, your factories and so on. So we should be able to think about the sustainable, not only think, we have to act the sustainable agricultural production. Third dimension of the food is food for health. So food for health is now, it's a very serious topic. In fact, he will be focusing more there. The food for health, if you see, not only food for health of humans, food for health of environment. Food pyramid, everyone knows. If you look at the food pyramid with reference to the nutrition, your base of the pyramid is, if you want to have a good nutrition, you go for your vegetables, your fruits, and so on. And in the apex of the pyramid, you should go for only the minimum needed the food, like meat. If you, for example, if you eat 1 kilogram of beef, you are in fact consuming 8,000 liters of water. In the sense, to get 1 kilogram of beef on your dining table, you need 8,500 liters of fresh water. So how do we then, the food for health, for the environmental health and for the human health, there the double pyramid of food, where whatever healthy for you is actually healthy for environment as well. For example, in the food pyramid, the base is the fruits, vegetables, and so on. And if you consume more, that is more healthier for the environment. That is why there is a movement now, you promote vegetarianism. But unfortunately, if you look at the economic growth, all the immediate impact of economic growth is you change your food habits. So long the people who have been consuming the vegetarian food, they will switch over to non-veg food. They will start with the chicken, they will go to for example, in the developed countries, your beef is more costlier than your chicken. Chicken is cheap. So this way, we impact on environment. So the food for health movement, talking about the double food pyramid, where the food is important for your health. There your health is your nutrition. This is where Dr. Hari will be talking about the garden for biofortified plants. Because your micronutrients is important. What you are consuming, you have to mind. Whether you are satisfying only your calorie and protein needs, or are you satisfying your micronutrient needs? From where does the micronutrient come? The micronutrient comes from your biodiversity. So that is why people say, if you consume more biodiversity, you are in fact satisfying more micronutrients. That is why they say, the nutrients say, you eat a rainbow, which means your food plate is based on the colors. If your food plate has got all the 7 colors, your nutrients is satisfied. From where this color comes? The color comes from the biodiversity. So the food for health, that is the third dimension in the food production. And the fourth dimension, the food for culture. If you look at every culture has got a different kinds of food. So I come from the south, extreme south of India. Our culture is we in fact we are most fish eaters, I would say, in the country. I think Keralites are more fish eaters. Any other society have not come across that much fish eating society. Fish and tubers. If you look at maybe the intelligence of Keralites, we can straight away attribute to the fish protein from fish and the nutrients from the tuber crops. So the point I am making, the culture, the India's culture, the cultural diversity, each cuisine, the culinary diversity, each culture has got their own culinary diversity. Malayali culture has got their own culinary diversity. In Malayali culture, in Malabar culture is totally different. There, the one religion's food is totally different. So the multi-ethnicities, the multi-culture, in fact, helped to use the biodiversity in multiple ways. So that way, we ensured the nutrition security. So these four dimensions, when we talk about the biodiversity and the food, so biodiversity and food, when we talk about the food for all dimension, the food for sustainable growth dimension, the food for health dimension, and the food for your cultural dimension. Unfortunately, everything is getting homogenized now. So the globalization means homogenized culture. Your heterogeneity has gone. First of all, heterogeneity has gone from the environment. Ecosystem is actually a system where so many components, but we are homogenizing our ecosystem in the name of production. If you look at we were talking in the morning. If you look at the Indian thinking, the political fraternity thinking is to reform the agriculture sector with reference to the production and the productivity, not with reference to the diversity enhancement, not with reference to the upkeep of the cultural diversity, not with reference to the biodiversity and health of environment and human beings. So on this day, we have to think loudly. That is why we are celebrating this day, not just because of as a ritual. So we should be able to plan. We have requested Dr. Yadava. In fact, Professor Swaminathan, today also he sent a message. The foundation is going to focus on two streams. One is this garden of biofortified plants. When we say garden of biofortified plants, your consumption should come from not from the market, not all from the market. At least 1/4 of your consumption should come from your home, where from the home garden, where you can have multiple kinds of nutri-rich plants. And India is again famous for the medicinal heritage. If you look at our Ayurveda system, the Unani system, the Siddha system, all the traditional system, in fact, we have used scores of plants for our health needs. Why we are adding spices to the food, actually? The spices to food actually is to compromise your health issues. Otherwise, there is no need of the Western people, they won't add that much spice. But we add turmeric, we add ginger, we add so many different, we add pepper, so many things. This, in fact, contributing to our health. The functional food, people are talking about functional food because the disease-specific food. People are even marketing food for diabetes, food for your less cholesterol, food for so many other kind of things. So this is where India, again, we have so much of health, wealth, the medicinal plants wealth. We should be able to exploit such wealth. So when we wrote to him, we told if you look at the biodiversity, see the earth, 3/4 of earth is water and 3/4 of earth is saline water. And if you look at our biodiversity in marine, not much is known. No much is known. If for example, if you take seaweeds, all other ocean-rich countries exploited their seaweeds. For example, Japan, China, Indonesia, Vietnam, all those countries. Not much India. Not much India. So there is huge potential for exploiting the seaweeds for the nutrition. So that dimension, Professor Swaminathan is talking about the biosaline agriculture and the biofortified agriculture. Then he is bringing up another concept, the concept of Bio Valley. So, for example, if you look at the Bio Valley, say the Silicon Valley, everyone knows. The Silicon Valley got into famous because of the small startups, and the electronic industry went up, income went up. The same can be applied in the herbal industry, particularly in the case of the medicinal plants. You can think about, if you look at the Western Ghats or the Eastern Ghats, so much of diversity there. And there is now that economic aspiration is there. Come forward, come use the technology, you start business, you use your spices, you use your medicinal plants, you use your medicinal rices and so on, start up some enterprise. And then, you give use the market appropriately. So the concept of Bio Valley is utilization of market, utilization of technology, utilization of human power and the biodiversity in a sustainable way. So this way, the foundations are what I'm trying to tell you. Foundation is unique in the sense we are for the sustainable utilization of bioresources, not just for conservation. If you look at the CBD, the conservation, sustainable use, and equitable benefit sharing. By and large, when we talk about biodiversity, people talk about only the conservation. The next two, the sustainable use and the benefit sharing dimensions, unfortunately, not into practice. So foundation, we are trying to practice. That is why our team is a multidisciplinary team. So this way, I took a little bit long time, but the subject is an important subject. So all of us should be seriously concerned about what we are doing and why we are doing this. What we are doing and why we are doing and how this will benefit first my society. Say the India. So India is a mega biodiversity country. Still, one of the mega biodiversity countries of the world. So am I contributing to this sustainable use of my biodiversity, our biodiversity? So our biodiversity is for our health. So biodiversity is life. Biodiversity is our life. So with these words, I welcome you and I thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Today, Biodiversity Day is observed in a very big way in Chennai. The Vice President of India is here in Chennai, and many of the national biodiversity experts are in Chennai today. And he had pressure on going there, but since he committed to us, he had come here. So we thank you very much for coming over here. So with these words, I welcome all of you and thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anil Kumar, for highlighting on the importance of biodiversity conservation and MSSRF thrust on biodiversity conservation for food and health. Now I request Dr. G.N. Hariharan, the Director of Biotechnology, to deliver his talk on genetic garden of nutritionally fortified plants.
Respected Chief Guest, Dr. Anil Kumar, my colleagues. Indeed, it's a great pleasure to stand before you and give a small talk on the kind of work what we are doing here. It's an opportunity to showcase our work to you, sir. The concept is to really bring in the nutritionally important crop back into the farms, and also so that it will also reach the consumers, and we can achieve nutritional security. Before I get into this particular slide, the whole idea, the brainchild of the whole program, is this particular statement of Professor: agri-horticultural remedies for nutritional melodies. Today, the biggest problem in the country, not only in the country, in the world, is the malnutrition, mounting levels of malnutrition. When it comes to Indian context, nearly 53% of our Indian women are suffering from anemia, and more than 80% of children less than 5 years of age are either stunted or wasted. So this is the levels of malnutrition, and especially this is highly pronounced in the rural settings and so on. But if you really look at, more than 50% of the global workforce is employed in agriculture, and in India it is much more. And with respect to sustainable, the Sustainable Development Goals, goal number 2 addresses ending hunger. The word hunger, there are two major dimensions. One is the calorific hunger, but the hunger what is not seen is the hidden hunger. You have protein and micronutrient deficiency. Micronutrient includes both vitamins and minerals and so on. So how to go about in addressing that? This is a very important slide, in the sense the first 1,000 days of the child, right from the day of conception to 2 years. This is where the child requires all micronutrients for its full growth, both physical and mental, the brain development and so on. This is where especially micronutrients like iodine, iron, all these things need to be there to the child and for the mother, so that the development will be wonderful. Otherwise, what will happen? On this side, I have given the normal child, how the structure should be. If it is not there, the child will be either stunted or wasted, or both occur together. This is a very bad scenario, and majority of, that's what I told, 80% of our children are suffering from this kind of a problem. So how to address that? To address this, ending the hidden hunger, we need to have food-based approaches. There are two approaches again. One is drug-based approach, where you can give an iron tablet or what. That is not going to be solving the problem, but food-based approaches can really eradicate the malnutrition. And how to do that? Unless and otherwise our farms cultivate this nutritionally important crops back into their kitty, we will not get them in the market, or we cannot get them into our plate. So in the food-based strategy, focus on the necessity of improving the diet, both availability of the nutri-rich food, so that the cultivation, and that will also lead to dietary diversification. When we take up this kind of an approach, right now, sir, we are only focusing on the garden component of it. Obviously, the marine products, the dairy products, all these things contribute to food security. So don't, right now for the purpose of this program, we give more emphasis on to the garden. This will bridge the disconnect between agriculture and nutrition, nutritionally important crops back into the farm. And it will also, when we have this kind of a farm, it will also create a lot of awareness to the people, and that will lead to consumption of this nutritionally important material by everyone. There is a strong connection between agriculture and nutrition, but right now there seems to be a gap. Farming is the world's largest private sector enterprise, and that is true for India. Nearly 70% of our workforce is involved in. Only 55% of global crops go to nourish the people. We are slowly losing large number of nutritionally important crops from our plate. This particular statement is very important. 1 in 8 people worldwide goes to bed hungry every day. This is a very, very sickening scenario. They are not even able to get the necessary calorific requirement, meaning the cereals and so on. Forget about nutritionally important proteins and minerals and so on. So we need to really bring, we have to address this particular issue by really reinforcing the farming system, so that they will also have all the nutritive elements in that. The FSN model Foundation is talking about is a location-specific model. We have several agroecological conditions in the country. Each agroecological condition have a unique set of plants which provide nutrition. Inclusive model, and it is resource, it is based on the resource endowments of the particular location, and that shall address the nutritional needs so that the maladies can be removed. For this particular approach, MSSRF is following 5 major areas. One is about developing and demonstrating location-specific model farming system. Second one, when we develop the model farming system, the necessary material for nutritionally important crops need to be available in one particular place. That's where the grid of garden of nutri-rich plants has to be established, creating a cadre of community hunger fighters, communicating to the stakeholders through various media so that the awareness, nutrition awareness can happen. And finally, based on our evidences, we help the policymakers to come out with very clear policy statements. With respect to the garden of biofortified plants, this is the basic statement. The edible plants serve as the largest supplier of human nutritive elements and minerals. There are two types of plants here. One is naturally nutrient-dense plants. It's like our moringa. It is not a biofortified material. It's not through breeding. The another one is the biofortified crop, where we generate this material through breeding program. Orange flushed sweet potato is a very good example. So this collects in these gardens will have both the material. This is a wonderful slide. Professor was kind enough to share this slide with me. With respect to moringa, the iron content on the leaf is more than 25% than in spinach. When we talk about highest levels of anemia in an Indian woman, even consumption of these kind of green varieties at least thrice in a week will easily bring them out from the anemic condition. And this is also a very good crop. It is a leguminaceous crop. It can also be used in the agroforestry system. You look at the kind of a diversity with respect to brinjals and other, all these, most of them are Solanaceae members. Botanically speaking, Solanaceae is a family of a large number of vegetables. You see the tiniest tomato, we located it in Collie Hills. The lycopene content is very high compared to the largest tomato, which is coming through breeding. Similarly, the smallest mirchi there is the hottest one. So we have enormous amount of diversity. You also see the kind of pulses we have, and all these things are all available. The whole program from this perspective it is important, sir. A century ago, a large number of plants are available for human consumption. Now we can only find many of these material only in the seed bank or in the germplasm collection and so on. They are no longer getting cultivated in the field. Many of them are almost, we are not ready to even look at them as nutritively important crops and so on. So that is where the shrinking diversity we need to bring back. So we need to look at what are all the things we were earlier consuming, and we have to bring them back. And that is the basis for the establishment of the garden. This is a farm where you can see the farmer nicely has planted different varieties of nutritionally important crops into the farm, right from onions to greens and so on. So round the year, the diversification helps him to earn it is giving him remuneration, plus the family is also getting very nutritionally important diet. Similarly, from these kind of farmers, the traders are also able to get, and because of that, we are also getting a large quantity of our vegetables and fruits. The rainbow you talked about, this is a kind of a rainbow. All these crops can be grown in any given agroecological condition of India. This kind of a rainbow can be formed, and round through the year. For example, if I am talking about vitamin A deficiency, the kind of section in the garden should be able to provide round the year the nutritive material which will give the vitamin A for the consumption. With respect to this particular program, along with Krishi Vigyan Kendra and 4 agricultural prestigious agricultural universities of the country, we will be establishing garden in 4 different corners of the country. One garden will be coming very close to Kanpur. The second garden is in Palghar, which is very close to Bombay, city of Mumbai. The third garden will be in our Jaipur center, Orissa, and the 4th garden in Tiruvallur district. These are all our partners. This is basically to develop and demonstrate, again I told you, location-specific nutri-rich plant garden. All the native vegetables, all the natively easily can be grown. For example, you have a plant called sesbania. In Tamil, we call it as agathikkirai. It is very rich with respect to proteins are concerned. Even consumption of leaf will eradicate protein deficiency, achieving food-based nutritional security for the malnourished rural household. So this is the 2 major idea. And each and every location have a very specific reason for which we have chosen them, and we are going here. Jaipur is a place dominated by undernourished tribal people. And with respect to Palghar district, again, it is a tribal dominated district, but migration levels are very high. And most of them are malnourished, especially the Palghar block itself. With respect to Kanpur Dehat, even though it is very close to Kanpur city, the flooding during the rainy season and so on virtually make the farms not able to cultivate anything and so on. But very rich with in terms of the diversity of moringas there. I saw a moringa variety where the skin is very thin. They make a very good soup out of it. Those kind of varieties are not available here. So we can bring, the exchange of material within the country will also help us to get new material for our consumption. In Tiruvallur district, again, women anemia is very high, but this is the location where the farmers are cultivating large number of vegetables, but all of them are coming to Chennai market. But we need to promote the consumption in the local market and the local this thing and so on. So we have to establish this garden of nutri-rich biofortified plants specific to that ecology, build a knowledge of men and women farmers, so that we have a specific program to train the farmers with respect to, when we bring in some new crop, and the agro technology also need to be given for that training. And we have to also establish a resource center for seeds and planting material, so that when the farmer comes for the training, he or she will also get the necessary planting material, take it back to the farm, and put them in. And with the help of community hunger fighters, we need to create nutrition awareness among rural men and women in these four locations. To start with, this is the four locations, sir. But the larger idea to use all the KVKs of the country and put the grid of genetic garden of these nutri-rich plants all across, so that every district have a KVK. So in every district, there will be a center where people can walk in and understand what is the kind of malnutrition they have and what is the remedy. Selection I have already told you, and these are all the four centers in Jaipur, Kanpur Dehat. This is the sites we have identified, KVK Palghar also, and KVK Tirur. And this is the last, but the previous slide. In each garden, what happened? We started collecting large number of germplasm. So far, around each garden, each location, we have collected more than 100 different species of these nutritionally important crops. Due to summer season, we are not going for planting. They are all maintained in the mother nursery. Once the first rains are started, the garden plan is mostly on the nutritive elements. For example, vitamin A means vitamin A section will have plants which will, round through the year. Those plants will provide vitamin A rich material to the consumption. Like that, the whole garden is organized. And we had the series of meeting with the KVK staff and the progressive farmers. He is one progressive farmer, Shamlal from Kanpur. He himself is cultivating more than 20 different varieties of nutritionally important material into the farm. For the constraint of time, I'm not showing all those slides. We were able to collect as many germplasm as possible, the local varieties as possible, and they're all in the mother nursery. The second slide is from Palghar. Like that, in each location, in Tirur also we have. This is the basic crop calendar with which we will bring these plants back into the garden, so that every season there will be a crop for crop consumption. So this is the outcome will be the models of garden for the biofortified plant species in ecosystems, so that there will be a place for people to go and see what kind of material can be grown and what kind of material can be used for eradicating malnutrition. A minimum 100 species will get conserved and consumed. And it is also, in a way, arresting the genetic erosion, I will say. Otherwise, if this garden is not there, many plants are slowly drifting away from our vision. And we also expect an improvement in the dietary diversity scores of those people who are associated with the program. I thank for the opportunity given.
Thank you, Dr. Hariharan. Before I could call Dr. Yadava, I would like to read out to you the message which a professor has sent to us on the Biodiversity Day. International Day for Biological Diversity, new initiatives. Biodiversity is a feedstock for food, livelihood, health, and ecological security. In view of its importance, one day in a year is dedicated to recalling our indebtedness to biodiversity in all our activities on this planet. The MS Swaminathan Research Foundation has been commemorating the International Biodiversity Day from the time the idea of commemorating a day solely devoted to biodiversity was born. During 2019, MSSRF is introducing two new significant programs designed to promote community conservation and utilization of biodiversity. The first initiative is the organization of genetic gardens of biofortified plants rich in vitamin A, iodine, iron, and other micronutrients. These genetic gardens will be organized all over the country, both as an educational tool and a resource of raw material for farming system for nutrition. The second initiative is the organization of a medicinal plants bio valley starting from the Silent Valley forest and going up to Wayanad. The aim of the bio valley is to involve local communities in conservation and sustainable and equitable utilization. It is anticipated that about 1,000 farm men and women would be involved in the first bio valley in Kerala. It is hoped that all over the country, more genetic gardens of biofortified plants and herbal bio valleys, which can safeguard the Ayurvedic heritage of Kerala, will be organized. Now I request Dr. Y.S. Yadava to take the podium. Before that, I want to introduce him to you all. Dr. Yugraj Singh Yadava heads the Bay of Bengal Program, intergovernmental organization with a distinguished career spanning more than 35 years in fisheries and aquaculture. Dr. Yadava started his fisheries journey as a scientist with the Indian Council of Agriculture Research in 1976, followed by a brief stint as advisor fisheries to the Northeastern Council. Dr. Yadava's scientific and developmental works Alaya include pioneering studies on large river ecosystems and their floodplains in Brahmaputra Valley. Dr. Yadava is a cogent and prolific writer and a photographer. He has published about 150 papers and books, research journals, scientific and popular magazines, and reports, and has about 30,000 quality pictures of various facets of fisheries in his photo archives. Dr. Yadava also holds a PhD degree in fisheries management in floodplain lakes. Please take the podium, sir. I request you to. Thank you.
A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I must thank the foundation and in particular the respected professor, Dr. Anil Kumar, Dr. Hariharan, and other distinguished colleagues in the foundation for inviting me to address you on this occasion. Let me also apologize for my bad throat. I've been shuttling between Delhi and Chennai the last 15-20 days. Both have 35-degree temperature, but one is absolutely dry and the other is absolutely humid. So I think that's the reason that my throat has gone very bad. The staff from the foundation introduced me to you. I work with the Bay of Bengal program, which is an intergovernmental organization with the headquarters in Chennai and working in countries around the Bay of Bengal. Our larger focus is on fishing communities, small-scale communities, Although in the past, we have also worked in areas such as the salt workers, but by and large, the focus has remained on the coastal fishing communities. We are into our 42nd year of existence. Although I joined the organization only in the year 2000. So one could say that I'm there for the 50% of the organization's life. But I was associated with this organization when I was with the Government of India also. The invitation letter asked me to speak on the biodiversity aspects with a focus on seaweeds. Although seaweed is not exactly my area of work, but then as I was asked to do so, my presentation in the later part also focuses on the seaweed. And I think it fits in very well with the three golden words of the 2019 International Year of Biodiversity, which is our biodiversity, our food, and our health. I have about 12-13 slides. I will try to take the allotted time given to me of 20 minutes. Might extend 5-10 minutes more. Excuse me for that. So, keeping those three keywords of the International Biodiversity Day, my presentation also is structured in the same way. I'll talk a little bit about the significance of this day. Then what does sustainable development mean in the context of biodiversity? I'll speak a little bit about the marine biodiversity and then conclude my presentation with a couple of slides on the seaweeds. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Anil Kumar spoke in detail about the International Biodiversity Day. The UN has been celebrating days for almost each and every aspect and theme now. In 365 days, I believe we have about 75 days committed to different themes and different days. And this is one of them. But this celebration is very appropriate because at least on one day of the year, we get reminded of our commitments as human beings in conservation of the environment, in protection of the biodiversity, and aspects related to it. So this year the theme is our biodiversity, our food, our health, and it underpins the role of ecosystem functioning and the provision of goods and services essential to human health and well-being. And to be a little more specific, biodiversity is also the variety of life at genetic, species, and ecosystem levels. I bring this beautiful picture to you, which talks about the sustainable biodiversity, sustainable development and biodiversity following the ecosystem approach. And this also takes into account the aspects that you read in the previous slide. It talks about ecological well-being, human well-being, and nicely balanced by effective, or in other words, good governance. And if we are able to take care of the ecology, which basically is the biodiversity, the human well-being in terms of their livelihoods. And as Dr. Anil Kumar said, that in 1972, when the then Honorable Prime Minister of India spoke at the Stockholm conference, she said, poverty is the problem. So I think human well-being is at the focus, at the crux of everything. If we can maintain human well-being, I think we can do a lot about the ecological well-being also. And all these things can only be effective if there is good governance, there are good institutions, there are good policies, and there are good laws to regulate our actions. Biodiversity conservation in India, I've briefly picked up few aspects, both from the legal and from the policy aspects. The CBD came into existence in 1992. India ratified it in 1994. And in 2002, the Biological Diversity Act was also promulgated, which provided the legal base to the conservation, to the access, to benefit sharing of biodiversity in the Indian context. The Biological Diversity Act defines biodiversity as the variability among living organisms from all sources and the ecological complexes of which they are part, and includes diversity within species, between species, or between species and of ecosystems. It's an excellent definition given in the Act. And the Act also have provisions to set up authorities. It has already set up the National Biodiversity Authority with the headquarters in Chennai. State biodiversity boards have been set up. It also mandates to create people's biodiversity registers and village level biodiversity committees. I believe if the last two establishments are also created and proper capacity is built within these organizations, a lot can be done on the conservation and wise use of biodiversity, both the land-based biodiversity and the coastal and marine biodiversity in the country. We also have the National Policy on Marine Fisheries of 2017, which in one of the paragraphs has highlighted the need of mainstreaming biodiversity conservation in production processes. And the policy, the National Marine Fisheries Policy, includes management plans, conservation of ecologically and biologically significant areas, or in short, as we call the EPSAs, the vulnerable marine ecosystems, and protection of endangered, threatened, and protected species, and the setting up and wise management of the marine protected areas. I thought I'll also share the slide with you, which talks about the status of marine biodiversity in India. And I would not read the figures, but as you see, the marine biodiversity in India is extremely rich. And some of the ecosystems within the larger marine ecosystem are hotspots of biodiversity in the world. For example, the Gulf of Mannar, and there are many other such areas, which are hotspots of biodiversity. The marine fisheries as such is very diverse. A long coastline of 8,000 plus kilometer, an exclusive economic zone of 2.02 million square kilometer, with a huge fisher population, fishing crafts. The contribution is almost is 0.79%, fluctuates between 0.79 and 1. And the 2017-18 sales at the retail level amounted to 80,000 crores. So that's a huge contribution of the marine sector to the economy. You also see how the production has increased from 534,000 metric tons when the planned development started in India in 50-51 to 3,834 million metric tons. But this increased catch has also led to consequences which are not good. The box on the left-hand side, it gives a very dismal picture. It says that India, of about 46 commonly exploited species, 10 species are fully exploited and 5 are fully or overexploited. And more importantly, the waters within 100-meter depth, which are also highly productive, are overexploited. So what does all this mean in terms of biodiversity? It means that this overexploitation has also ill consequences on the overall biodiversity aspects of the coastal and marine waters. You know, I'm not going into the details, but in any food ecosystem, there is a web, what we call the food web. And if one or two elements of the food web are taken away, the web undergoes a change. And when the web undergoes a change, it contributes to loss of biodiversity at various levels. It's a very complicated process, but it takes place. And there are various reports, scientific reports from peer-reviewed journals, which talk about the loss of biodiversity in a very significant manner because of the break in the food web. I'm giving one example of the sharks. Sharks, in the food web are at the top. They're the top predators. And as per official statistics between 1950 and 2012, India removed about 3.36 million tons of shark, or about 238 million sharks were removed. And this has been compared with the India's population in 1950. So that is about half of the India's population in 1950. So as all of you, are dealing with the natural resources, plants or animals here, so you'd be able to estimate, when such a large number of top predators are removed, what happens to the food chain. And when there is a disruption in the food chain, what happens to the biodiversity? Because every organism in this food chain is linked to each other. And one is taken out, it has effect on the other. So, we are concerned, and this concern is there in the red box, that biodiversity loss is a concern. So what do we need? We need a foolproof governance system to manage the bad and build on the goods. We do not have a very good scientific basis on the quantification of the loss of biodiversity. We use destructive gear like trawls, which are non-selective. They pick up everything that comes across its way, and that impacts the biodiversity in a large manner. The fishing capacity, the effort deployed is very high, and it's increasing. The average size of the catch is falling. Besides either disappearance or a very conspicuous reduction in the numbers of a large number of species, the other disturbing sign is the size of the landings is getting smaller and smaller. So a seerfish or a ribbon fish, which 20 years back was this big, average, is now this big. We also, in our fisheries terms, we use the word fishing down the food chain. And we have open access, we have weak monitoring, control, and surveillance. And I was telling Dr. Anil Kumar in the morning that the exclusive economic zone, which is from 12 to 200 nautical miles, is not yet legislated, which means that any fishing activity which is being carried out within 12 to 200 nautical miles so far is not legal, because it doesn't have a law. For 0 to 12 nautical miles, we have a law. The Marine Fisheries Regulation Act of each coastal state, it regulates the fishing activities within 0 to 12 nautical miles, which is the state's territory. But 12 to 200 nautical mile is the territory which belongs to the union government. And there's no legislation for that. So in other words, I'm using a harsh word, but it's the fact that anything concerning fishing being done in that area is illegal. Although people talk about another act, which is the 1976 act called the Territorial Waters, Continental Shelf, Exclusive Economic Zone and other Maritime Zones of India Act of 1976, in which there is a section which says that nothing applies to fisheries. But that only says nothing applies to fisheries, it doesn't talk about the regulation. So if you read both these things together, the activities happening in the EEZ at the moment are unregulated, and in the modern terminology, they're illegal. So the center is now coming out with a legislation. The bill is under preparation, and it is hoped that within this year or early part of 2020, the legislation would be approved by the parliament. So that's the situation, and that explains my use of word de facto open access. Now, coming to the last part of my presentation, as I was asked to speak also on the prospects of seaweed, I have a few slides to share with you, few details to share with you. So seaweed, they're microalgae, and there are several species of macroscopic multicellular and marine algae. And they also, as they say, they fall in red algae, brown algae, green algae, etc. They are part of the traditional diet in Southeast and Far East Asia. Some of the seaweed varieties in Japan and Korea, they're very expensive. In Japan, seaweeds are used in many ways, from breakfast to dinner. Globally, seaweed production has been estimated in 2016 at 31 million tons. And this again, like the Indian fisheries, almost the same trajectory. We were 0.52 million metric tons in 1950. Seaweeds were 0.56 million tons. We are around 3.5 million tons in fisheries. The seaweed is 31 million tons, so almost the same trajectory. There are about 49 countries from all continents that are producing seaweeds now, and China is the leader. In fact, in the FAO statistics, we talk of fish in one box and seaweeds in the other box because the production is so high. Coming to the Indian scenario, various studies show viable potential of seaweed farming. And CMFRI and the Central Salt and Marine Chemicals Research Institute has also done extensive work on the seaweeds in Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, Lakshadweep, Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Maharashtra, etc. And on a commercial scale, PepsiCo started first commercial investment in seaweed farming around 1994. But then in 2008, it sold it to an independent company called Equagri. And also something which might be of interest, I was also the member secretary of the Coastal Aquaculture Authority for 9 long years. And I don't exactly remember the year, but somewhere in 2003, 2004, we also permitted PepsiCo to do seaweed farming in the coastal waters. But my latest information says that Equagri also, after a certain period of time, did not grow further. It has some establishments in southern Tamil Nadu where the seaweed, mostly collection is done. Farming is very limited. There's more collection than the farming. And that also, it's not, like globally, seaweed farming is more than the collection. But in our case, the collection is more than the farming. Now, being part of the policy debates on coastal and marine fisheries in India, we always talk about seaweed as a livelihood diversification. We don't talk about seaweed as an occupation as we talk about the fisheries. So I think we need to change that. We also say that, okay, seaweed is for women empowerment. It is good to say that, but then it limits the space. How do we popularize seaweed as a source of nutrition? I know our diet is completely different from the Southeast and Far East diet. But in case we have to consider seaweeds as a source of nutrition. And this is the last part of the theme of 2019 International Day of the Biodiversity, our health. And like your genetic gardens, the seaweed is also full of nutrition. So how do we popularize seaweed as a source of nutrition? And so far in the traditional diet in India is a background character and often omittable. So how do we bring it on the table? These institutions have dedicated research programs, but the technology and product demonstration and its uptake has not been as good as the technology creation. And I think instead of marketing seaweed as a superfood, we should market seaweed as a food. That might change people's perception. So when we say superfood, then we, compare it with other superfoods that are more easily available. In some cases, which are more palatable than seaweeds. And in some cases, which are more quickly consumable. So you gulp a capsule. It's much easier than, chopping seaweeds into your soup or into your salad bowl. I think I'm coming close to my presentation. So India ranks 76 out of 113 countries in the Global Food Security Index of 2018. And we need to improve this. Your vegetable gardens, can do a lot to this improvement. There is a lack of macro and micronutrients, and I won't go. Professor Hariharan talked so nicely about this issue. And as I said, seaweeds are rich in micronutrients, sodium, magnesium, calcium, potassium, etc. And also in the micronutrients such as iodine, iron, zinc, copper, etc. But at this moment, since production is not there, and if we have to import the seaweed, ready-to-eat seaweed, then I think affordability is the issue. And that picture on your right-hand side, it talks about yakinori roasted seaweed, 28 grams. And that is 160 rupees for 28 grams. So, conclusion. Now I combine everything. Biodiversity is a goal and means itself. And it can play a role in improving productivity and food choices. While there are broad concerns about the loss of biodiversity due to fishing, but we need to go into more details. Good science. The National Policy on Marine Fisheries and the National Biodiversity Authority's registrars make bridge this gap. And also we need to rationalize pressure on marine fisheries, which can be one of the ways to stop the biodiversity loss. Seaweed farming and collection can be promoted as an alternative option that is more in the context of marine fishing. And India does have a suitable environment, but so far the uptake is low. We need to improve the local market. We need to familiarize seaweed with the masses, and the institutes need to provide a persistent support. The government is now also coming out with a mariculture policy. It was on the website, the draft policy on the website for comments, and I think it will be finalized very soon. So seaweed farming needs to find a good place in the mariculture policy of India. So ladies and gentlemen, with this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Y.S. Yadava, for the presentation and so much information on seaweed and seaweed farming. Now the floor is open for questions. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I brought some posters on biodiversity. So, it's 25 each. One poster is both in English and in Tamil. And the second poster is of different type, that is only English. So, anybody interested in picking up, kindly please.
Any questions? No?
So this is one type of poster. And this is another one, which is both in English and in Tamil. This one is in
And thank you very much, sir, for very informative presentation. I wanted to know, does our coastal fisheries have marine protected areas or marine reserves or no catch areas, whether they have traditional marine reserves, which is being practiced from community themselves, or government has created new marine reserves since last few decades, because marine protected areas is being gradually increased globally to increase the stocks of declining species. So I wanted to know whether marine protected area, the practice of increasing marine protected areas is also happening in India also.
See, so far the marine protected areas are set up under the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. But since they're set up under a law, the use of the MPAs becomes very rigid. And even the traditional communities which have been deriving their sustenance for ages are now not being denied access to the MPAs. So in the national policy on marine fisheries and globally also, now there is a trend that you always need not create MPAs within a legal framework. Communities can create their own MPAs, and government can also create MPAs which may not be as legally bound as the present practices. So the national policy on marine fisheries was out in 2017. The implementation plan is under finalization. And I think if the states, they start following the national policy, then communities, at least within the 12 nautical mile area, can be asked to form their own reserves and their own conservation areas with the guidelines as they consider appropriate.
Thank you very much.
So it's very interesting. You are talking about the new marine policy in the EEZ zone. Who is going to regulate that act?
No, it's not the marine policy, it's the act.
Act.
Yeah.
Who is going to regulate, and how there is any institution going to work on that? For
See,
the implementation?
The Indian Coast Guard is mandated to take care of the law and order. That taking care of the law and order is also part of their own mandate in the Indian Coast Guard Act of 1978. But this act also says that the Indian Coast Guard will regulate in terms of law and order and also in terms of the practices that are permitted or not permitted as per the new act that would come into force maybe 2020, early 2020.
Conservation parts, sir?
Yeah, they will take care of both. The Coast Guard has very broad provisions and powers in their own act, and this act further empowers them to look into the regulation, management, and also the law and order. Because you see, in the EZ, entry and movement is a very expensive affair. So you can't create other entities to do that. When you have a Coast Guard, perhaps the government will consider strengthening the Coast Guard and enlarging, its fleet size to ensure that the 2.02 million square kilometer is effectively covered. And the Act also talks about our role in the high seas. So it's not only the exclusive economic zone, but also the high seas, where India, being a signatory to regional fisheries management organizations, has a very important role to play. So the act will be, the bill, I should not call it an act now, the bill should be in public domain for comments maybe in the next month or so. So kindly have a look at the bill and comment upon it.
High seas, what are the rules?
No, high seas, the RFMOs, regional fisheries management organizations, are mandated to regulate certain species. And India, if it's a member of that RFMO, also, assumes that responsibility to protect the high seas, more in terms of those particular species which are part of the RFMO's mandate.
Now, do you have any suggestion for us for MSSRF, particularly to partner with organization like Bay of Bengal program, or because we also have equal interest in the marine environment, and maybe this is an opportunity for us to come together and work together. Do you have any kind of the area where foundation and BOP can work together?
Yeah, I think, the most important common thread that runs between MSSRF and BOBP is that both of us work for people, coastal communities, So, we do a lot of work on the food safety. We work on the value chain. We work on loss in, fishing practices. And I think these are the areas where we can very effectively work with MSSRF. And the Bay of Bengal program also has an important theme of safety at sea. And, MSSRF also works very extensively on the safety aspects of marine fishermen. So there are several areas, in which both MSSRF and BOBP can collaborate and, work together. And I think we need to do that because we need to build synergies, partnerships, and partnerships is also, I think it's the goal 17 of SDG. So I think we also meet that important commitment. The doctor had advised me not to speak. So I was following this only at home, telling my wife that I've been advised not to speak. But yeah, I've broken the doctor's advice today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now I request Dr. R.V. Bhavani, the Director of Agriculture, Nutrition and Health, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Well, I'm sure all of you will agree that the three illuminating talks that we have heard on the occasion of International Biodiversity Day have given us a lot of food for thought. And all of us will leave this room with a better understanding of the SDGs, the nutrition status, the challenges facing us, and the immense role that, of plant biodiversity and marine biodiversity that can play to contribute to food and nutrition security, to our food and our health. And of course, it's a vast area. We need to read up more, and it's just like a window has opened, and I'm sure those of you who are interested can take this forward. So on behalf of the MS Swaminathan Research Foundation, our very grateful thanks to Dr. Yadava. Thank you for making the time, and in spite of your illness, breaking your vow of silence to come and talk to us. And so with this insight we got about seaweeds as also being a very rich source of nutrition. And we need to look at how that could be promoted as a nutritious food for addressing malnutrition among poor malnourished people. And we look forward to thank you for the posters, and we look forward to discussing further with you about mutual collaboration. We are, as you are aware, we have a Fish for All training center in Pumpuhar where we work with coastal communities, and we look forward to taking this forward. My thanks to, of course, my colleagues, Dr. Anil Kumar and Dr. Hariharan. And it's very pleasant to see a lot of youngsters in the audience today. And some of you must be students or researchers. Thank you for coming. Thank you also to the other guests who are here, to people from the media, and of course my colleagues who attended the session. This has been our small effort in observing the International Biodiversity Day. Like Dr. Anil Kumar said, there are a lot of events happening across the country. Our regional centers in Wayanad and Jaipur are also having events to observe the day. And of course, Chennai being the headquarters of the National Biodiversity Authority, there is a big event happening with the Vice President gracing the occasion. Thank you for being here, and let's go out of this hall with the issue of our biodiversity, food, and health in our mind and see how we can do our bit towards this. Thank you.